Okay, guys, so chapter 4 discusses tissues. A tissue is a collection of different cells. When these cells combine together, they will have a specific function, and that's the tissue. And multiple different types of tissue makes an organ. So there are four basic types of tissue. The first one is called epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue, one of the functions is to provide physical protection. It covers the skin, and also it covers the line of internal passageway, which means it covers the walls of the hollow organs. Hollow organs are like tubes. For example, in gastrointestinal system, respiratory system, and urogenital system, inside is covered by epithelial tissue. So that way, it prevents entry of infections or any chemicals to the body. It provides sensation. There are specialized epithelial tissue that are connected with the nerves, and then that provides different type of sensation. For example, sense of touch and pain and things like that. So those are connected there. Controlled permeability allows some chemicals to pass through the epithelial tissue, and some are prevented to go through the epithelial tissue. An example is the skin. For example, in the skin, lipid-soluble chemicals can absorb, but water-soluble cannot absorb. Also, another example is in the kidney. For example, blood can filter, and that filtered become urine. Once it goes to the kidney tubules, tubules means small tubes, and then the urine cannot go back to the blood. So this is allow a partial permeability. It allows some chemicals to pass through epithelial tissue, but prevents some others. Depends on the location and type of tissue. Also, it secretes different things. So the secretion will create glands. Example is like salivary gland. Another example is endocrine gland. For example, thyroid gland and pancreas. The second type of tissue is called muscles. They are specializing in contraction and mobility. There are three different types of muscles are there. The first one is called the skeletal muscle. This is for voluntary movements. The second is called heart muscle. And the third one is called a smooth muscle, which is located in the wall of the hollow organ. So these two muscles, the last two, heart and the smooth muscles, are under subconscious control. So it's not under voluntary control. The third type of tissue is called neural tissue, and this is providing electrical signals that is carried from one area to another area of the body, and that is important for processing sensory and motor function. There are multiple chapters in your textbook, and when the time comes, I will provide a lot more details. So that's why I did not give a lot of information here. The last type of basic tissue is the connective tissue. There are many different types of connective tissue, and each one has a specific function. It provides, a filling space. It fills different spaces between the organs, so it provides like a cushion between the different organs. It is transporting fluid and nutrients and oxygen, so that is part of the blood. Blood is a type of connective tissue. Also, waste product is carried by the blood. It's also part of the immune system to fight against infections and cancer cells. It establishes a framework of the body, so that is that everybody has a head and neck and torso, upper and lower limbs. So here we are talking about the bones and the cartilages. Also, these bones are providing support and attachment for different muscles and different organs, and protect some vital organs. For example, protecting the brain, protecting heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, and some other organs. And finally, it is stores energy, so that is the adipose tissue or fat, that when the body does not need extra energy, that can be stored and that can be used later on. So the triglycerides and the fatty tissue can break down and provides ATP. So the epithelial tissue is divided into epithelia and glands. So epithelia is usually for protection, and glands are for secretion. So now let's talk about the specific criteria and characteristics of epithelial tissue that are different from other types of tissue. The first one is called polarity, so it means that one side is different than the other side. So if you can see it here, you can have microvilli or cilia there. This is on the internal side, for example, in the wall of the hollow organs. And on the other side, you have a basement membrane, this is called basal surface, and that is connecting epithelial tissue to a connective tissue, or you can have another epithelial tissue here. So this is a two different surface that is this is a little bit different. Then is attachment to the basal membrane. So this is the lowest part. If there is a epithelial tissue can have one or more than one layer. So the lowest layer or the deepest layer is attached to a type of connective type of tissue, or a structure, I should say, not tissue, a structure that is separating epithelial tissue from the connective tissue. So it's located here, and the basal surface is attached to that area. The third one is called cellularity. So it means that there are multiple epithelial cells. They are attached side by side, so are on top of each other. So because one of the function of epithelial tissue is protection, so you can see that these cells are attached to each other in different areas. These are the attachments, so many of them are attached side by side or on top of each other. Avascularity means that there is no blood vessels, so it's that the nutrients are going to epithelial tissue through diffusion. And regeneration is because epithelial tissue are exposed to physical, chemical, and biological trauma. They have to regenerate, and they are continuously made in the body. So once they are destroyed, newer ones are made. To maintain the cellularity, okay, then these cells should be connected to each other, and there are different mechanisms for that. So this is why it's called how the integrity of the epithelium are kept, because there are different reasons for it. The first one is called intercellular connection, so the connection between neighboring cells. So there is two different mechanisms here. One is called the large area of the plasma membranes of two cells that are attached to each other. So if you look at this one, this is an epithelial cell, and there is another epithelial cell here, and this is a plasma membrane here in the middle, and they are attached to with each other. How they are attached to each other? By these three things. So this is still adhesion molecule, which is with a protein. It's like a transmembrane protein. I will show it to you later. Intercellular cement, which is around here, and intercellular cement is also made of proteoglycans. So one of the examples of the proteoglycans is hyaluronan or hyaluronic acid, which is glycosaminoglycan or GAG, which is a complex carbohydrate. Proteoglycan itself is made of proteins, and some carbohydrates are attached to that, and an example of that is hyaluronan. And I put an example of a wall, so you can see these bricks. These bricks are like similar to cells, and in between you have the cement in between. So this is how they are connected to each other, so the wall will not fall. and this is a cement is in the between is similar to these three mechanisms that you can see it here. So these bricks are attached and keep it very strong, and it does not disintegrate. If you just put these bricks on top of each other, it can, break easily. So that's why you need to have something in between to connect them together. Okay, so we are still in the intercellular junction. So the second mechanism for intercellular junction is called cell junction. There's three different types of cell junctions. One is called the tight junction. Here you can see that this is one cell membrane, and here is another cell membrane, and they are connected with each other with these proteins. So these are the tight junctions proteins. So it prevents movement of fluid from one side to another side. So if this is one cell here, and this could be a tubule of a hollow organ, so for example here is urine, it will prevent movement of urine back to the blood. So this is how it prevents that. And this is also, you see that you can see that in the kidney, or another example, you can see that in the nervous system. So nervous system also protected by these tight junctions. So the second type of cell junction is called the gap junction. Here is just the opposite of tight junction. So you have these proteins that are connecting two cells. So this is one cell membrane here. This is another cell membrane here. And these are the proteins that are connecting two cells. So this is it's an opening here in between. There's an opening. These are called the connexons. So these proteins are called connexons, so transmembrane proteins. So ions, for example, sodium can pass through it, and also a small lipid soluble can pass through it. A good example of a gap junction, you can see it in the cardiac muscle cells. That sodium can pass through from one cell to another cell, and then multiple muscle cells contract at the same time. But you can also see gap junctions in different type of epithelial tissue. Then the third type of the cell junction is called desmosome. Desmosome is a connection in different area of the cell body. Usually it can be between the wall of the two cell body, or it can be the base of a epithelial cell with another type of cell, or it can be with a basement membrane. So based on that, you have two types of desmosome. One is called the spot desmosome, and the second one is called hemidesmosome. The spot desmosome means that the two cell walls are connected side by side, or the two cell walls are connected on top of each other. I'm talking about the epithelial cells. So example, you can see in this image, you can see this is one cell wall, this is another cell wall here, and they are connected with each other by these cell adhesion molecules. So these are the transmembrane proteins, and they are interlocking each other. So they are connected with each other. These cell adhesion molecules are attached to another structure that's called dense area, and the dense area is supported by the intermediate filaments, one on each side, and this is why it's called a spot desmosome. But if it is only in one side and the other side is not there, then that is called hemidesmosome. So I will show you the hemidesmosome here. So the second mechanism for keeping the cells together is called the basement membrane attachment. So here is the epithelial cells that are, if they are only one layer, so they can attach directly to the basement membrane. If there are multiple layers of epithelial tissue, then the deepest layer will attach to the basement membrane. So the basement membrane is made of two different layers. One is called the clear layer. This one, that's the clear layer, and this is from the secretion coming from epithelial tissue, and this is called lamina lucida. This is how it is spelled. And the second one is called the dense layer, and this is a lot of fibers there. These fibers are provided by the connective tissue, and this is called lamina densa. And so both of these layers together, then it makes the basement membrane. So going back to the hemidesmosome, you can see that this whole area, for example, this whole area, this big one, will be an epithelial cell, and this is the base of that epithelial cell, and then that base is attaching to the basement membrane through this hemidesmosome. So these are the cell adhesions molecules are here, these ones, and they are attached to this area, and now these are the intermediate filaments. So it's only from one side. So this other side, you do not have epithelial tissue, you have connective tissue. This is why it's called hemidesmosome, not spot desmosome. Spot desmosome is if you have two epithelial cells connected to each other. Okay, so the third mechanism for keeping the epithelia together, that is regeneration. That regeneration happens from stem cells, and these stem cells are called germinative cells also. So they are located in the basal layer, so the deepest layer, the cells that are on top of the basement membrane, and they are making new cells. And when the new cells, they become more superficial, and they are destroyed, and then the new cells are formed. So this happens throughout life. So another topic is the classification of epithelia. Epithelia are divided based on the shape or based on the layer, but usually when you name them, you combine both of them together. So here you can, based on the layer, you can say it's one layer. If there's one layer, then this is called simple. One layer is called simple. So you can see one layer of cells, one layer of cell here, one layer of cell here. And based on the shape, there's three different types of shapes here. This is the flat one. The flat one is called the squamous. This is the cuboidal, square shape. So this is called cuboidal. And these are the tall ones, and these are called the columnar. So if you combine both of them together, so the first one is called simple squamous epithelium, which means it's one layer and it's flat. The second is called simple cuboidal epithelium, which means one layer but it is square shape. Third one is called simple columnar, which is one layer, but these are the tall shape epithelial cells. The second type is stratified. It means there is multiple cells on top of each other. That's called stratified. And again, based on the cell shape, then subdivided into different types. So this is the squamous one. So these are the flat ones that you can see. This one is called stratified squamous. So don't look at this part because this part looks cuboidal, but when they name them, they usually name them based on the more superficial layer. So the second one is this is a stratified column cuboidal, which means it's more than one layer there, and they are cuboidal in shape or square in shape. And the third one is called a stratified columnar, although the deeper layer looks cuboidal in shape, but the superficial layer is columnar in shape. So stratified means what? Multiple layers, but based on the superficial layer, they usually divide them into squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. So now a little bit more detail about each type. These are very important. They will be tested in exams, so please make sure to know these things very well. So simple squamous epithelium, this is for absorption, secretion, and diffusion. So the secretion that they make is they're secreting fluid that is very slippery, so that will reduce friction, and that is between different organs that are mobile, so that will reduce damage to those organs. Where are they located? One is called mesothelium. Mesothelium is located in the body cavities. So there are three different body cavities. One is that the pleura, and that's surrounding the lungs. The other one is called pericardium, that is surrounding the heart. And there is another one that is covering the abdomen, that's called peritoneum. So I will show you these things again later. And this will be discussed in more detail in the lab 1. There's also other body cavities, but they are covered by different type of cells, so they are not called mesothelium. Another example is endothelium. So endothelium is covering the blood vessels and also the heart, the inner layer of the heart. You can also see simple squamous in the kidneys, in the lungs, and this is where the gas exchange takes place. In the kidneys, this is where the filtration of the blood take place, that different chemicals and fluid is leaving the blood, and also in cornea, which is in the eyes. So you can see it in different type of tissue. And this is an example of the simple squamous. So the border is a little bit crooked. It's not very smooth and straightforward. This is the nucleus located in the center of it, and this is another example of the simple squamous. Sometimes simple squamous epithelial tissue can be confused with adipose tissue, but I will show you the adipose tissue is a little bit different than this. You might say that how come this is simple squamous, because it is so many layers on top of each other. It's not on top of each other. It's actually taken from a superior view. So if you take it from side view, it is a very thin layer. But this is taken from above. This is why it looks multiple layer. Now is a stratified squamous. And you can look at it here, this example here. This is the stratified, so these are the cuboidal shaped, but as you go higher and higher, the cells become flatter, and that's why it's squamous. But because there's so many layers are there, and that's why it's called a stratified squamous epithelium. So this is for protection. You can see that in the skin, you can see it in the mouth, in the esophagus, and the rectum and vagina. So anywhere there's a lot of friction going on there for protection against physical, chemical, or biological damage. This is why you have it here. And similar in this image, you can see this superficial layer is flatter. This area that you see, these cells are flat compared with these ones that are more cuboidal in shape. So you name them based on the superficial layer, and it's stratified because it's multiple layers of the epithelial cells on top of each other. This area that you see, this is connective tissue. So don't bother about this area, or this area that you see in this image. Don't bother about it for now. Okay, the cuboidal again divides into simple cuboidal and stratified cuboidal. You can see this is one layer, and this is a duct. This is empty inside. There's a cavity there. So this is the hollow organ that I was talking about it before. And this is one layer of the cuboidal epithelium, simple cuboidal. So this again, this is a duct similar to this one, and this is just one layer here. And if you see this one, this is not actually stratified because this is another duct, and this is the hollow part of that duct. So this part is similar to this part. But here it looks like they are multiple layers, but they are not. So they are just separated from each other. Two ducts are side by side. So if you cut it longitudinally, this is how you get an image like this. But if you make a cross section, if you cut it like this, then you can get an image like this. So you can see these are simple cuboidal, one layer of cells, and this is the cavity, one layer of cells. This is the cavity here, this one layer. So where you see it in different ducts, for example, in the thyroid and pancreas that I was telling you before. different glands and different ducts of those glands, and also you can see it in the kidneys. So in a kidney you can see simple squamous but also simple cuboidal. A stratified cuboidal, that is for protection, secretion, and absorption. So you can see that these cells, this is the cavity here, this is the cavity, and this is one layer, and this is the second layer. So this is one layer, this is the second layer. And this image, this is one layer, this is the second layer, this is one layer, this is the second layer. And also in this image, this is one layer, and this is the second layer. So here is multiple layers actually. Here, one layer here, and one layer. It's a little bit more difficult to see. Okay, so it covers some ducts in the body. Transitional is a little bit different. You can see this only in the urinary tract, so in the urinary bladder, urethra, and ureter, not in the kidney. Okay, I'm emphasizing again, not in the kidney. So if the urinary tract is collapsed, it means that there is no urine there. So these cells distend and have a balloon shape kind of appearance. You can see these ones, they're big in size. These cells big in size, they're ballooned up, so they're big because there's no pressure. But once there's urine there, the urine compresses these tissues, so you can see the urinary bladder is full. So now the same cells that were there now is compressed. So it looks like a squamous epithelium. The deeper layers are cuboidal, so that does not make a difference, but here is most of the cells compress here. So these balloon shape become flatter here because they transition from one shape to another shape, and then they are called transitional. You don't see this in other type of tissues. You do not see it in any other areas in the body. Okay, so simple columnar means that is one layer of the epithelial tissue that is tall shape. This is for secretion and absorption. So you see it in the different parts of the body, and these are the tall shape cells. In the middle, you have the nucleus. Okay, in the middle. So this is usually this is a simple columnar. In the middle, you have, because there's other type of the columnar epithelium that a little bit different. So looks the nucleus is in the middle. It may or may not have cilia. Okay, it may or may not have microvilli. It depends on the location. And again, here you have these cells that are there. Okay. So they are located in the gastrointestinal system, in the stomach and intestine. You can see it in the gallbladder. Also, you see it in the fallopian and uterine tubes, and in the kidneys. And collecting ducts, usually collecting ducts is part of the kidney, that is, urine is located there. The second type of the columnar is called pseudostratified columnar. It means that it looks like stratified, but they are not. Looks like, but they are not. So you can see these cells that are there, and you can see these ones. Actually, these are better examples that you can see it here. This is some of these nuclei are in the middle, and some of these nuclei are here in the lower part. So these are in the lower part. So all of them are attached here in the basement membrane here. Okay, all of them are attached in the basement membrane. So this is called pseudostratified. Looks like multiple layer, but actually all of them are attached to the basement membrane. They are located in the respiratory tract, in the nose, and in the in the trachea and also partially in the bronchi, and also in parts of the male reproductive system you can see pseudostratified. And then is the stratified columnar. It means that a multiple layer of the epithelial tissue that are tall. So this is for protection mainly, and they are located in the throat, in some ducts, and also in the urethra. So not that common. So here you can see very clearly that these cells are cuboidal shape, and then the most superficial layer is the columnar. So this is the columnar one. This is the columnar one, and this is very typical layer of the cuboidal that you can see deeper. And similar here, so you can see columnar here and another columnar layer there. So both of them looks like columnar here in this tissue. Classification of the glands here. So there's two types of glands. One is exocrine gland and the other one is endocrine gland. I did not write it there. Exocrine glands usually drain directly, drain in the duct, and endocrine glands drain in the blood. So that's a little bit different. So once again, exocrine drains in the duct, so they have their own duct, and that duct will drain on surface of the skin or maybe in the hollow organs, but endocrine will drain directly to the blood. So that's the difference. So now we are mainly talking about the exocrine, because endocrine glands, we will have that as a separate chapter, chapter 18. So that's an interesting chapter. You will like it, and we will discuss it later on. So type of secretions or mode of secretions here. One is called Merocrine secretions. Here you have the cells produce the different secretions, and they are packed in these vesicles, and then the vesicles release. And these are the secretory vesicles inside the cell, and they are gradually released. And the cells will stay alive. So it's always alive. You can see that in the sweat glands, okay? And apocrine glands, the superficial layer of the cytoplasm sheds, so that breaks off from the rest of the cell. The cell stays alive, so it will continue to produce this. Also, you can see then a specific type of sweat glands. And holocrine gland, this is that the cell produce the secretions. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally it ruptures. So when it ruptures, then the cells dies, and then new cells are formed there. So in these two, Merocrine and Apocrine, the cells will stay alive, and in the Holocrine, usually the cells dies, but they have the stem cells that produce new cells. The other type of classification of the glandular epithelia is based on the secretions. Some of them produce serous fluid that's called serous glands, and they are the fluid is very clear and very slippery, and they are located in the body cavities to reduce friction between two organs, usually the organs that are mobile. For example, the stomach and intestine, heart and lungs. Mucus glands, these secretions are a little bit thicker. They are produced in the respiratory system and gastrointestinal system, and some of the exocrine glands are producing both serous and mucus secretions. Gland structure is another classification of the glandular epithelia. So that divides on the number of cells. One is called unicellular glands, and that means that there's only one cell at a time. They are randomly distributed in different parts of the epithelial tissue. They produce mucus, and these are called the goblet cells. So the good example of this is in the intestine and also in the respiratory tract. Then the second classification is called multicellular. It means it's made of multiple cells together that makes a gland. That divides again into the simple glands and compound glands. So simple glands means that they have only one duct, just one duct. Okay, just one duct. The secretion drains in one duct. Again, they divide based on how they look like. If they are elongated, they are called tubular, or if they are spherical, they are called alveolar or acini. So it's a little bit different based on shape. Also, just to make things more complicated, some of them are unbranched and some of them are branched. Like this one is not branched, it's just one of them. And this one you can see in the intestinal gland. Some of these ones are actually twisted, like this one. So this is, you see it in the sweat gland, Merocrine sweat gland. This is called simple coiled tubular, so it's not just straight. And some of them is combination of the simple tubular. So this is the branched one. So one here, and one here, all of them drain in just one duct. And this is called simple branched. So this is simple branched and this is simple unbranched. And where you see it, you see it in upper gastrointestinal system, for example, in the tongue, you can see it in the esophagus, in the stomach, and duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. Then the alveolar or acinar ones are two types. One is simple alveolar, which is not that important in adults, and simple branched one is, you can see it in the sebaceous gland that produce oil. So this is one gland here, one gland here, one gland here, but they have only one duct, and then the secretion goes to the surface around here. These are called compound ones, which means that they have more than one duct, and then those smaller ducts will drain in a bigger duct. So this is one duct here, and one duct here, and then they drain in this common duct. So that's why it's called compound. So compound divides into three different types. One is called compound tubular because these are all elongated, similar to the branch ones. Branch tubular ones, but there are multiple branch tubular ones. So you see one branch tubular here, one branch tubular here, one branch tubular here. You see that in the mouth, you see it in the bulbourethral gland, which is part of the male reproductive system. It secretes a basic with a pH. I'm talking about the pH. It has a basic fluid that clears urethra. And also you see the endoseminiferous tubules. These are the ones that producing sperm. The second one is called compound alveolar or acinar. And see, you can see that this is spherical shape, but this is branched alveolar. So one branch alveolar here, one branch alveolar here. So they have their own ducts, and then they drain in a common duct. This one is called compound alveolar. So you see it in the mammary gland or the female breast glands. And then is called compound tubular alveolar, which is a mix. So some of them are elongated, some of them are spherical. So it's a mix of the two, and they drain in a common duct. You see that in the salivary gland that is producing saliva, for example, in the mouth. And you see it in the respiratory system and also in the pancreas. So now it's a different topic that's called the connective tissue. So this is the second type of the basic tissues. The connective tissues, all of them have three specific characteristics. They have specific or specialized cells. Each cell has a different function. And they are made of the matrix. The matrix is made of two things. One is the fibers, which are made of proteins. And the second one is called ground substance, which in some tissues it is fluid, and some tissue it is solid. And these ground substance, they may have different proteins, or they may have other chemicals in them, and that gives a very specific characteristic to that type of connective tissue. So the special characteristics of connective tissue, that all of them have it, One is the cells, the other one is the fibers, and the third one is ground substance that varies from one to another. The basic classification of connective tissue is the connective tissue proper. This is the first one. The second one is called fluid connective tissue, which is like blood. And the third one is supporting connective tissue, which is like bones or cartilages. So now we'll talk about each one separately. So now we are talking about the connective tissue proper. So make sure when you study this, look at this heading, because the heading changes and that is talking about different topics. So that's important to concentrate always about the heading. Characteristics of connective tissue proper. I told you that all connective tissue have three things in common: the cells, the fibers, and the ground substance. So now let's talk about the cells. So the letter A, talking about the cells. The most common type of cells are the fibroblasts, and they are producing different proteins, for example, collagen, which I will talk about it in a few minutes, and hyaluronan. If you remember it, this is part of the intercellular fluid that is absorbing water. So glycosaminoglycan that's absorbing water. If the fibroblasts become mature, that becomes fibrocytes. So fibrocytes are maintaining the connective tissue. Fibroblasts making a different type of tissues and producing different type of proteins, but fibrocytes are maintaining. Once the tissue is made, then it maintains the specific characteristics and maintaining the homeostasis. The third type is called melanocyte, that contains melanin, which is a pigment. And when I get to the skin, I will talk about more about that pigment. Adipocytes, that contains fat. So fat, as you know, it is full of energy. So when the body does not need energy, that's stored as fat. Mesenchymal cells, these are stem cells, and if the body is injured due to any kind of inflammation, or if there's a cellular damage, the cells dies for any reason, then these mesenchymal cells produce new cells. Macrophages are part of the immune cells. They are fixed and free ones, so they are fighting mainly against infections, but also against cancer cells. Another type of immune cells are called mast cells, and they have vesicles. These vesicles contains chemicals, and if there is an injury or infection, any type of inflammation, those chemicals are released from the mast cells, and now then those chemicals actually give signals and new immune cells come to the area. Lymphocytes are another type of immune cells, and they are different type of lymphocytes. Some of them are producing antibodies, and when they produce antibodies, they become plasma cells. Macrophages, these are smaller cells. They are located in the blood. So when the chemicals are released from macrophages or from the mast cells, then the macrophages come to the area through the blood, and some of them actually leave the blood and go to the tissue and then fight against the infection or any kind of damage, and that's how an inflammation is created. So the second characteristics of the connective tissue is the fibers, and we are talking about connective tissue proper. So the connective tissue proper has three different types of fibers. The first one is called collagen fibers. And if you see that in this image, these are the pinkish kind of color. They are very thick. They are strong, and they are flexible, and they resist forces in one direction. So what does it mean? For the best way to understand is to give you an example. For example, the connection between bone and a muscle, or a bone with another bone. So it's just one direction, a specific direction. Elastic fibers, these are the wavy ones, the thinner ones, and they are a stretchable one. So once you pull them, they stretch, and then they go back to the normal length, but they are not that strong. The third one is called reticular fibers, and these are the dark black ones that you can see, darkish blue or black ones that you see. These are the ones that are short, and they are thick and strong, and they are keeping the cells of solid organs together. So the parenchyma is the cells of the organs that have actually specific function. This is called parenchyma. So these are keeping all these cells together. So this is why they are small, but there are so many of them. It's creating a network like a tree. The third characteristic is ground substance. So it is clear, it is colorless, and it's viscous, and that viscosity is actually a good thing, because if the infection goes there, it slows down the infection, and that way the immune cells go there and they destroy the infection. This image is actually a very good image because it will show all different types of characteristics of connective tissue. So start with the cells, so you can see the macrophages. So this is one macrophage, this free macrophage. This is the fixed macrophage. So immune cells, both of them. Another immune cell is mast cell, and you see these dark bubbles that you see. These are actually the vesicles that contains chemicals. Another one is called the lymphocyte. So this is the lymphocyte, and the nucleus is really big, and sometimes it changes to the plasma cell. Another type of cell that is very common is the fibroblast here, that produces different fibers, and this is the mesenchymal cells, or stem cells, that produces different type of cells. You can also see the adipocytes that contains fat, so inside is the fat. You can see the red blood cells here, the red blood cells. This area that you see, this is not actually connective tissue. This is epithelial tissue, but ignore it for now. And another cell you can see here is the melanocyte. This is dark pigment here. Okay, the second characteristic is the fiber. So this is the thick one. You can see this is the collagen fibers. They are going in different directions. Then is the elastic fibers. This is the thin and wavy. And the third one is this. This is the reticular fibers, creating a network, this area. And the third characteristic of connective tissue is the ground substance, which you can see it here, the background. So that the light pink that you see, that is the background, and that is the ground substance. So now it's the type of the connective tissue proper. The first one is called the loose connective tissue. Another one is called dense connective tissue. So loose connective tissue divides into three different types. One is called the loose areolar tissue. This is least specialized. It means that you can see it in different areas of the body, for example, around the blood vessels, and under the skin, and under the epithelial tissue, and different hollow organs. It contains blood vessels, and is made of the these collagen fibers. You can see it here, collagen fibers, lots of collagen fibers, and also some elastic fibers. These wavy ones that you see, these dark wavy ones that you see, these are the elastic fibers, like this one and this one and this one. And these are different type of cells that are there. So some immune cells are there, fibroblasts are there. So this is one type of loose areolar connective, one type of loose connective tissue. So the first one is called areolar tissue. The second one type of loose connective tissue is called reticular tissue, and that is made of reticular fibers. These are reticular fibers, and as I said before, it's creating a network, and they are connecting all these cells in the solid organs together. This is the connective tissue, and they are located in the reticuloendothelial organs. So the reticuloendothelial organs include liver, the spleen, bone marrow, kidney, and also lymph nodes. So kidneys, in some books it says part of reticular endothelial system, some books it does not say that, but the other four are definitely part of the reticular endothelial organs. The third type of loose connective tissue is called adipose tissue that contains fat. There's two types of fat. Okay, one is white fat, which you can see in most children and adults, and the brown fat that you see in the babies. So the function is a little bit different. Brown fat in babies and newborn and very young children, infants, usually it's important for thermoregulation because their system of heat control is not very well developed. So if they feel cold, then this lipid breaks down and that produces heat, which is a good thing. But in other populations, so from childhood all the way to the old age, anytime that you eat and you don't use that energy, so that converts to white fat, and the white fat is extra energy, which you may need it or you may not need it. So sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes the extra fat that is there, it creates a lot of other complications and other diseases. So that depends on the situation. But if we had all brown fat, that would have been a lot better. So if you look at this slides here, you can see the brown fat. See if they are filled, the border is very smooth. This is all fat. This yellow area that you see is all fat. So they are filled with fat, and this is why it is yellowish. The border is smooth compared with the simple squamous epithelium. And also, if you can see that the nucleus is pushed to the side. In the simple squamous, the nucleus was usually in the middle of the cell. Here it's pushed to the side. If they are not filled totally with fat, then some of them look like this one. See, this is not filled with fat. This is not filled with fat, but this is filled with fat. This one is almost filled, and this one is almost filled. So and this is why I put two different slides so you can see the difference between the two. And if there is a lot of fat there that the body does not need it, the adipose tissue do not divide themselves. Like the adipocytes do not divide, but the mesenchymal cells make new adipocytes, and then the new adipocytes store extra fat. Okay, so you had a loose connective tissue. The second type is called dense connective tissue. These are both types of connective tissue proper. So now again we have three different types of dense connective tissue. So dense regular, dense irregular, and dense elastic. Dense regular, it means that it contains a lot of collagen fibers, and they are parallel to each other. And here, same thing, parallel to each other. These dots that you see, these are actually this is a lower magnification, and these are the nuclei of the fibroblast. So they are very, parallel to each other in the same direction. This can be confused with a smooth muscle. So with a higher magnification, you can see the difference. With a lower magnification, it might be a little bit difficult to see it. Where do you see it? You see it in the tendons. Tendons are connection between muscles and bones. Ligaments, connection between bones and bones. And aponeurosis, usually, not always, usually connection between one muscle to another muscle. This irregular connective tissue, this is also made of the collagen fibers, but now these collagen fibers are going into different directions. So they are not parallel to each other. That's the thing. So when you cut it, it looks like this. It's not very regular and parallel to each other. They are very irregular in shape because they're going in different directions. And they resist forces from multiple directions. That is why it is like that. They found in the skin, so in the dermis layer of the skin, you see it wrapped around the cartilage, wrapped around the bones, and also it makes the capsules of the solid organs. So in a simple form, it wraps around different things and resists forces from multiple directions, compared with dense regular that resists forces from one direction. The third one is called elastic tissue. Some sources divide this as a separate type of connective tissue. Some of them put it under the dense connective tissue, so it doesn't matter. For the sake of argument, for now, let's keep it under the dense connective tissue. So this is made of elastic fibers, and elastic fibers, I said before, is long and they're wavy. So you see these ones, they're long and wavy, so like that. So where you see them in the spinal vertebrae and the blood vessels. So this image actually is from the blood vessels. Why in the blood vessels? Because the blood vessels can distend and collapse, so it needs that some elasticity. And also in the penis, because the penis, same idea there. So it can go to different sizes, so it needs some elasticity. Okay, so there is also fascia there. So you can look at the fascia. So there's three different types of fascia. One is called the superficial fascia. So that is under the skin, and this is made of the areolar connective tissue and adipose connective tissue. The second one is called the deep fascia, and that is made of this irregular connective tissue, and they are usually in the tendons. So the tendons are where the muscle attached to the bones. It wraps around the solid organs and wraps around the bones and wraps around the cartilages. So it's usually around this area. But you cannot see all of them in this area. And the third one is called subserous fascia, and this is again similar to superficial fascia. Is made of the loose areolar connective tissues around this area, and they are located between the deep fascia and serous. Serous is this layer, so this is the deepest layer, and this is where it wraps around different organs in the body cavities. For example, it wraps around stomach and wraps around intestine and lungs. The second type of connective tissue is called fluid connective tissue. Again, we talk about three different components of the connective tissue. One is blood. One is the cells. So here the cells, you have the three different type of cells in the fluid connective tissue. One is the erythrocytes, which is red blood cells, and they are carrying oxygen. It looks like donuts. The second one is called leukocytes, and there's 5 different type of leukocytes. These are the white blood cells. One of them is called eosinophil. It has vesicles that when you stain it, it looks orange or purple in shape. The other one is called neutrophil that does not stain very well. And the third one is called basophil that is bluish. These vesicles are bluish in color. Also, you have monocytes. They are really big cells. And the nucleus is a C-shaped or U-shaped. And finally, lymphocytes, that the nucleus is really big and the cytoplasm is not as big. So the nucleus is taking a big part of the cell. And finally, by the way, these cells have different functions. For example, if there's a bacterial infection, acute bacterial infection, neutrophils are activated. If there is any allergic reaction, eosinophils are activated. And if there is antibodies formed, lymphocytes are activated. If there's an inflammation, then monocytes goes to the tissue and that becomes macrophages. Basophil also produce different chemicals. So there is different functions for each. And the platelet, these are parts of the cell. They are not actually cells. They're part of the cells that are important for blood coagulation or clotting. Extracellular fluid, they are made of the plasma, lymph, interstitial tissue or fluid used to be part of the fluid connective tissue. Now they say this is a different organ, but still it is considered as a type of fluid connective tissue. Then is the protein. So there's different proteins in the blood. Some proteins for clotting system. Some proteins are as antibodies. Some proteins carry different hormones. Some drugs attached to them. Also, they are important for oncotic pressure, which means that keeping the fluid inside the cardiovascular system. So there is a lot of different proteins are in the blood. Now is the other type of connective tissue. So we had connective tissue proper, we have fluid connective tissue. Now is the supporting connective tissue. There's two types of supporting connective tissue. One is cartilage, the other one is bone. So let's talk about the cartilage first. The cells of cartilage, these are called chondrocytes, and they are located in the lacunae. Lacunae are cavities or chambers. So this whole area that you see, this is the lacuna. Lacunae is the plural form, and each one that you see, this is a chondrocyte. So this is a lacuna, and these are the chondrocytes. So then is the matrix, which is this. This is the cartilage matrix. So this contains the ground substance, and also it contains different proteins and fibers. So there's a proteoglycans is there, and chondroitin sulfate is there. That proteoglycans are important for absorption of water. Similar to the epithelial tissue, it is avascular, so it gets their nutrients by diffusion. And there is also, it contains perichondrium. So perichondrium wraps around the cartilage. So from here to here, this is the perichondrium. Perichondrium is made of two layers. One is the outer layer, which is this. This is made of dense, irregular connective tissue. And the inner layer, which is made of the cellular. So this cellular tissue contains the stem cells, and those stem cells produce chondrocytes. So these are chondroblasts that become chondrocytes later. And when we get to chapter 6, I will come back to this. I will talk about it in more detail. Types of cartilage, there is 3 different types. One is called elastic cartilage. So the name is obvious. It contains a lot of elastic fibers. These are the elastic fibers. So these dark blue cells, fibers that you see, these are the elastic fibers, very typical, and contains these chondrocytes that are in the lacunae. So these are the chondrocytes, and this whole area is the lacuna. Chondrocytes. So they are very flexible. So you can see that in external ear and in the larynx, which is, these are the cartilage of the larynx, which is epiglottis and cuneiform cartilages. So they are very flexible, but they are not strong. The second type is called hyaline cartilage. This is a balance of being stronger, but also flexible. So it's in between. So you can see here that this is a lacuna here, and it's made of a lot of different chondrocytes, contains a lot of different chondrocytes. And this is the ground substance. Usually the ground substance is homogeneous. You do not see much fibers in this area, pinkish in color. They are located in the synovial joints. Synovial joints are mobile joints, for example, in your fingers, arms and legs. There's a connection between the ribs and the sternum. So this is the chest wall. When you breathe in and breathe out, the chest wall moves. So that's why it needs some flexibility. Also in the airways, so trachea and bronchi. When you exercise, the smooth muscles relaxes, so the cartilage become wider, so more oxygen goes to the lungs. But when you're resting or sleeping, the airway narrows, and this is why you need this kind of cartilage to give the airway some flexibility, because too much oxygen is not good for the body either. So you need a balance. When you need it, you get more oxygen. When you don't need it, you don't need to have more oxygen. The third type of cartilage is called fiber cartilage. This is really strong cartilage. So if you look at it, you have these chondrocytes here, chondrocytes here. These are all chondrocytes. And lacunae is difficult to see, but it's chondrocytes here. And you also see these fibers. So these are the collagen fibers here. These are the fibers. You couldn't see this in the hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage was more homogeneous. Here is not as homogeneous. So this is, they have different functions. It's keeping two bones together, for example, in the pubic bones or in the intervertebral, between the bones in the intervertebral discs, keeping the two bones together, make it stronger joints, or sometimes it increases the surface area. For example, you see that in the knee. So it depends on the location. The function is a little bit different, but they have a lot of fiber. It means they are very strong, and it gives a lot of support to the joints. And this is how you can see the growth of the cartilage. So there is two types. One is interstitial growth, and the second one is called oppositional growth. So here you can see the chondrocyte here is in the inside the lacunae and surrounded in the matrix, and the chondrocytes divide, and there's become two. So from one it became two, and now the new matrix is formed there. So this is how the cartilage become bigger and bigger. But in the positional growth here, you can see there is a this is the perichondrium. So this is the fibrous layer, and this is the cellular layer. And the cellular layer, you have the stem cells. So the stem cells divide, and then they make new chondroblasts. So chondroblasts are younger chondrocytes. When they are making chondroblasts, the chondroblasts are making new matrix here surrounding the chondroblasts, and when they are surrounded totally by chondroblasts, then they become this area changes the matrix. They become a little bit different, so they become older, and when they become more mature, then they become chondrocytes. So chondroblast is younger, and chondrocytes are a little bit older, and chondrocytes are maintaining the matrix, and here the chondroblasts are usually making the new matrix. So that's a little bit different. Okay, so the second type of supporting connective tissue is called osseous tissue or bones. So they are very strong. This is the strongest type of tissue in the body. The cells are called osteocytes. So these things that you see, these dark cells, these are all osteocytes. This is the diagram of the osteocyte. You can see all of these are osteocytes, and they are arranged around the central canal. So this is the central canal, contains blood vessels. I'll come back to this chapter 6 again in more detail. You don't need to know all the details. This in between the cell, this is the matrix of this area. This is the matrix, and this is calcified here, totally calcified. It means that there's a lot of calcium precipitated. That's why it is very, very strong. And finally, it also has periosteum. So cartilage has perichondrium. This has periosteum. This is the periosteum. So surrounding the bone, it has two layers again. The fibrous layer, which is dense irregular connective tissue, and the cellular layer, which is contains stem cells, and they are making new osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are young osteocytes. Okay, membrane is a different topic, and this made of epithelial tissue and connective tissue, and depends on the location. They have a different function, but mainly work as a physical barrier. There are 4 different types of membranes. One is called mucous, the second one is serous, third one is cutaneous, and the fourth one is called synovial. So let's talk about each one separately. The first one is called the mucous membrane, and they cover the wall of the hollow organs. On the wall of hollow organs, again, is the gastrointestinal system, respiratory system, urinary, and reproductive system. If you look at it here, you can see two different types of tissue. One is epithelial tissue, the other one is the connective tissue. So here epithelial tissue is simple columnar epithelium. It contains some mucus glands, so the goblet cells are there. And here is the connective tissue, which is the loose areolar tissue, and the name here is called lamina propria. So the mucus that is secreted here, that is reducing the friction. So when the food or feces or urine or anything passes, then it will reduces the friction. It's also important for absorption and excretion. For example, in the intestine is important for absorption, and in the urinary system and the gastrointestinal system is important for excretion. But you don't see the mucus glands in the urinary system usually. The second one is called serous membrane, and serous membrane is producing transudate. So transudate is a fluid that contains little protein and is very slippery. So that is why it is good for reducing friction. When two organs are in touch with each other and they are always mobile, they are moving, so that reduce physical damage. You see it in the in the body cavities, and these are the three body cavities: the pleura, the peritoneum, and pericardium. So it's made of, again, two types of tissue. One is the simple squamous epithelium, that is here in this case is called mesothelium because that is the body cavity, and then is the deeper layer is the loose areolar connective tissue, and that contains blood vessels, and the fluid goes to the cavity, and that reduces the friction. The third one is called the cutaneous membrane, and that's made of the stratified squamous epithelium and loose areolar connective tissue here superficially, and this irregular connective tissue deeply. So this is very thick, and it is important for protecting the body against any physical, chemical, or biological agent, but also it prevents the body to lose fluid and blood. So it's bidirectional protection. And I'll talk about this in more detail. Chapter 5 is about the skin, so we'll leave it for now. Synovial membrane is the fourth one. So this is located in the joints, the mobile joints. This is one bone. If you look at it here, one bone here is wrapped. The end of each bone is wrapped by a cartilage, hyaline cartilage here. And there's a cavity in between that contains a fluid, and this is the synovial fluid, very slippery. And the synovial fluid is coming from this area. So this is the joint capsule, and if you look at it in a higher magnification, it's made of epithelial tissue and also made of the loose areolar connective tissue, and the loose areolar contains these blood vessels. So the fluid is coming from this area. It goes to the synovial cavity, and that reduces the friction. Okay, the muscle, there's two chapters about the muscle, so I will put one slide here. When the time comes, I will go in more details of each one. So there is some muscles are stratified, some of them are non-stratified. So what does it mean? It means that you see these lines, these are stratification. So there is a reason for it. When the time comes, I will talk about it. It's usually an overlap of different fibers inside the muscle. And this one is non-stratified, so it does not have those lines. Some of them are uninucleated. It means it has only one nucleus, like this one. Some of them on this cells are uninucleated, but some of them are multinucleated, like this one. So you have one muscle fiber with a lot of nuclei. Okay. Some of them are under voluntary control, like this one. This is the skeletal muscle, and some of them are involuntary, which is the cardiac muscle and the smooth muscle. Okay, so if I summarize it, this is the skeletal muscle, which is voluntary and striated. This is the cardiac muscle, which is striated, involuntary. Most of them are uninucleated, sometimes multinucleated. And this is the smooth muscle, which is involuntary and is non-striated and uninucleated. So this is spindle shape, and the nucleus is usually in the middle. I told you before this can be confused with this regular connective tissue, but if you look at it, if you go back to that slide and look at it, it's very different. And the neural tissue, this is about 5 chapters about this, so I will not talk about this in more detail. For now, just to give you a brief information. In your textbook is a lot of information is written, but I think is for now is good enough. This much information. Neural tissue carries electrical signals. It's important for understanding internal and external environment. Any sensations coming from outside or from inside the body, that the central nervous system will process that information. It is for movements, also for higher brain function, for example, memory, learning, judgment, personality, and other stuff. Okay, so also there is 2 types of the neural cells. One is called the neuron cells, that is carrying electrical signals, and the other one is called the neuroglia, and this is the one that is supporting, these are supporting cells for the neurons. So these are all the neuroglia there. This is the providing nutrients for the neuron. This is the neuron, and also if there is any kind of damage, it will repair the damaged area. If there is any kind of infections come there, then they will go and destroy the infection. But I will talk about these ones a lot more. There are 6 different types of neuroglia, so I will go over it in more detail later on. So if you have any question, let me know. Thank you.